When a sports team signs a premier free agent, it can be one of the most important moves the team ever makes. Signing a top free agent can lead to franchise-changing success, iconic moments for the player and the team, and if you're lucky enough, championships. It could also end up like this, but we're not talking about that today. Well, at least by the expected contract they were projected to earn, the top free agent of the 2021 MLB offseason was former Houston Astros shortstop Carlos Correa. Oppenheimer. Correa's years in Houston were the beginning of a Hall of Fame trajectory. Drafted number 1 overall at just 17 years old, still the only number 1 pick ever to come from a school outside of the US 50 states. He was a Rookie of the Year by age 21, All-Star and Champion at age 23, and top 5 AL MVP finisher in his final year with the team. He was also an excellent defensive shortstop every year of his career there and hit 18 playoff home runs in his 7 years with Houston. Point is, everyone should have wanted this guy on their team. The only issue was an imperfect record on his health. He had missed noticeable chunks of 3 different seasons with Houston through various injuries. But in this day and age, everyone gets hurt somehow in some way in sports. I learned this firsthand when a D1 arm decided to plunk me in a YouTubers versus real baseball players game. My lifetime on base percentage versus D1 athletes is almost as good as Correa's was as an Astro, believe it or not. For reasons we may not even really be privy to, Correa didn't get that long-term deal when he first hit the market. He was after one the whole time. Other infielders on the market did get great deals. Correa was still standing around unemployed during spring training of 2022. As the clock ticked later and later, a team no one could have envisioned landing a prized free agent gave him a deal he was willing to take. And it shocked people. Carlos Correa and the Minnesota Twins, who had not won a playoff game in over 18 years, agreed to a contract. 3 years, $105.3 million. A far cry from what Correa was expecting to earn a few months ago, but still one of the largest deals the Twins have ever given out. You may be deconstructing all this and say, why would a top free agent on the market willingly take this number when they were predicted to earn this number? Even if his annual salary still broke the record for most money per year for an infielder, you may just be thinking Correa had a bear market compared to expectations. Oh, and also speaking of bears, we have this special edition clothing drop for you guys with a bear on it, and it's winter themed, available this weekend only, so please consider buying one if you like it. We'd really appreciate that, and it'd go a long way towards supporting us. But there was a very important wrinkle in this deal Correa signed with the Twins that makes it seem a lot more sensible in his shoes. After each year of the contract, Correa had the option to leave the deal and the team and test the open market again. From his perspective, year 1 with the Twins was just going to be a prove-it year, showing the rest of the league what they missed out on and prove he deserved the big bucks that he seemingly was destined to earn for his baseball prowess. Like the real big bucks, not just a $105.3 million deal. And if that didn't work out, not the end of the world. He could just reset again the next year too. He's still only 27 years old at the time of signing this contract. He's definitely got a few more years in the tank to prove his worth. But luckily for him, he wouldn't need much of that extra time because he was still a beast in 2022.
Behind the bag! Got it! What a play!
Correa had the perfect reset year. In some ways, he improved offensively from a year where he was top 5 in MVP voting. There were no major downturns in his health. The coast looked to be clear to use that opt-out in his contract and finally have a real chance at a ginormous long-term deal. He played so well, it seemed like his Twins time was just going to be a funny blip in the career of a great player. Kind of like this. Because no way they'd be able to pay the new market value price for Correa. In a weird way, he played himself into a spot where there realistically could only be a few landing spots for him. Huge market teams that typically spend money and needed a shortstop. The New York Mets had the richest owner in baseball, and thus could be linked to any free agent out there, but they have a shortstop already, locked up to the kind of deal Correa wants. You can only play one shortstop at a time in baseball. The Mets have already committed to one that just so happens to be a friend of Correa's. The Yankees have the biggest reputation in baseball history for buying great talent on the free agent market. They just have a huge hole to fill already. Correa actually isn't the best free agent on the market after 2022. he's the second best. Even after a great year for him in Minnesota, that was never gonna be attainable when a guy who just hit 62 home runs was also hitting the open market. Priority number one for the Yankees, keep that guy in New York. So Correa going there may not really be plausible. The San Francisco Giants also have Aaron Judge as a top priority this offseason, and have been desperate to land a big-name player for years now. They wanted Bryce Harper, they couldn't get him. They wanted Giancarlo Stanton, they couldn't get him. They are hungry to make a splash at all. Ideally someone who maybe could make splashes too. You know, in the water, behind right field, that it took over 20 years for a right-handed hitter to hit a ball into. Part of why the Giants feel the pressure brewing to have a huge free agent get is their division rival Dodgers, who today are the spenders in baseball. The Dodgers can probably be crossed off the list, though, for Correa, because they're actively waiting and budgeting to give Shohei Ohtani the largest contract ever a year from now, and they probably don't want to bring in a guy their fans associate with, in their mind, stealing a World Series from the Dodgers.
The Astros organization should be ashamed of themselves. I can't let cheaters cheat on my watch. See, I cheated on my wife, but I learned my lesson.
Not a great fit there. The dominoes start to fall when Arson Judge appears headed to the Giants. No, that's not a typo in my script, that's what the reporter said. To the dismay of every Giants fan on the planet, that didn't end up being the truth. The Yankees made a late ploy to give their star whatever he wanted, kept him in New York, and soon named him captain. Crossed the Yankees out for Correa now too. Officially. They've just made their huge offseason payday here. The Giants become the most obvious destination left though. They want to spend money, the kind of money Correa is looking for especially. They want to land a player of his caliber because, simply put, they don't have one right now. And finally, on December 15th, the sides converge. Carlos Correa and the San Francisco Giants agreed to a 13-year, $350 million contract. At this moment, that would be the fourth largest deal in Major League Baseball history. On December 20th, they're set to announce it. A press conference to make Carlos Correa an official San Francisco Giant. 3 hours before that press conference is set to begin, the Giants cancel it. Correa was on his way to said press conference when he got word that it was canceled. His wife, parents, brother, and in-laws were on their way too. I genuinely cannot imagine what that news must have been like in that moment. He was excited to be a Giant before this. He was exploring San Francisco looking for houses and preparing to embrace this new commitment. You very rarely see marquee free agent signings get canceled. So, what could have happened there? That morning, the San Francisco Giants brass got back the results of a physical exam Correa took for them to finalize the agreement. It's standard practice for this sort of thing to happen, especially with how much time and money the Giants are about to invest in Correa. Teams want to know if, like, you ate a bomb pie, an explosion of your body is imminent. Turns out, the Giants were afraid of what they saw in Correa's ankle. In his entire time in Major League Baseball, he has never had any ankle injuries. He fractured his fibula and had surgery for that in 2014. He called their concerns shocking and vehemently pushed back on their worries about his long-term health. It wasn't personal. They were just now unwilling to make a 13-year commitment to what their medical findings showed. Correa later added that he's never even needed treatment on his ankle during his MLB career to that point. His fractured fibula from before he even came into the big leagues was something he, quote, hadn't thought about in years. The Giants, evidently, disagreed. They were spooked and wanted to renegotiate the terms of the agreement. Correa's agent, Scott Boras, claims he gave them, quote, reasonable time to be sure of what direction the team wanted to go after this. Supposedly, they said they'd know 2 hours after the originally scheduled press conference time. If not, Correa's camp was going to reopen negotiations to other teams. Who else could even be seriously interested? Nobody knows. As we established before, the Giants seemed like the landing spot. If they're pulling out, this could be the Wild West for everyone involved. Correa later described himself as a guy who, quote, turns the page pretty easily, meaning he rebounds from bad news or bad life developments quickly and effectively. He claims he moved on quick. He was going to have to if he didn't want to lose his mind over the stress of losing out on a $350 million contract. Well, At 2:38 in the morning Eastern Time the next day, the world was in for a shock.
Carlos Correa is a New York Met. Carlos Correa is a New York Met. Oh my God!
You saw that Carlos Correa was going to the Mets, and you're like, that's not right. That can't be. This is a mistake.
I thought it was another fake tweet.
Of the New York Mets kind of stealing Carlos Correa from the incompetent San Francisco Giants organization.
This floored the baseball world. The Mets, who were already on pace to obliterate the MLB payroll record for a single season, had agreed to a mega deal with Correa.
It would be the most expensive team in North American professional sports history. The Mets have, if Correa passes the physical, which he is expected to do at this point, of course.
But they already have a high-paid shortstop, a really good one at that. Doesn't matter. They swooped in after the Giants pulled their toes out of the water and got him. The plan was going to be for Correa to shift to third base, a position he has never played in the big leagues, but thinks he could be a good fit in. That might actually be an understatement, because Correa figured as a third baseman, he could bulk up, maintain more of that good mobility from shortstop, and make the transition very well. Maybe like how A-Rod did for the other New York team many moons ago. Correa supposedly tackled Boris onto a hotel bed in celebration when he learned an agreement was reached with the Mets. What can you say? The Mets have that kind of effect on people. Boris supposedly called the Mets owner, Steve Cohen, when Correa's market officially reopened to other teams, and said the words, "Welcome to Correa-miss. This is your lucky day," which is only about the 68th corniest thing Boris has ever said. Now, supposedly, the Giants went radio silent during all this. Meanwhile, Correa and the Mets were about to meet on a 12-year, $315 million deal. Pretty good save for him, all things considered. He was really just losing out on 1 year of $35 million extra when he was going to be 40. But wow. What an outstanding turn of events. The Mets are now concerned about Carlos Correa's ankle. 3 days after the news of Correa's agreement with the Mets broke, new developments came to light that the Mets started to feel the same way the Giants did. A truly insane twist that, believe it or not, caught everyone off guard again. It's even been reported that the Mets used the exact same doctor as the Giants, for some reason. Correa claimed to have taken and passed 3 physicals in 2022. He has now failed 2 in about a week. This put Correa's Mets fate in limbo until the Mets could figure out what they wanted to do. Apparently the Giants even called back during this, but nothing happened there. Correa seemed to be a bit laissez-faire on the matter. The New York Post thought it was newsworthy enough to report that Correa was celebrating Christmas with his family during the situation. Kind of starving for news, I guess. Look, big deal. Man celebrates Christmas. Doctors weren't able to pinpoint when they thought the ankle problem could take shape, but one doctor allegedly quipped that Correa had the worst ankle they'd ever seen. The Mets thought the risk was significant enough that they were starting to get cold feet too. As far as their cold feet, I don't know if the ankles were cold, but they probably thought Correa's were. They started bringing in lawyers to get involved to try and figure out what to do here. This is a team that a year and a half earlier didn't sign their first-round draft pick over medical concerns. Steve Cohen is a very rich man. He became very rich through sound investing. In making deals like this, he seems to view health as a massive part of the logic for what makes investing into a player good. For the next 17 days, Correa and the Mets tried to figure out how they were going to salvage the situation, if at all. Boris understood that a second team being openly afraid to commit a huge contract to Correa over the same health concern could crush his chances of getting a deal at all with anyone else. So, unlike the Giants situation, they kept the door open for a good while with the Mets to see if things could be remedied. But there wasn't any progress. For almost 3 weeks, Correa had agreed to 2 deals of $315 million or more in the span of a week. He didn't wind up getting to be official on either of them. The stigma of his ankle was just something he seemed unable to overcome, until an old friend came to his rescue.
We know where Carlos Correa will play next season and beyond. The same place he spent last year, Minnesota.
Minnesota!
6 years, $200 million, no concerns about his ankle, Carlos Correa returned to the Minnesota Twins. It's almost poetic, really. The two big market teams weren't satisfied anymore. The smaller market team he took a chance on the year before came back, albeit at a much smaller price point. The compromise was made to take a high dollar figure, shorter term deal to stay in Minnesota. Even at just 6 years, this was now the biggest contract in Twins history. The third team to reach an agreement with Correa this offseason. The first where a press conference could actually make it official. In total, Correa signed for 31 years and $865 million this offseason. If only it worked that way from a wealth generation perspective. We may never really know what truly happened with the Giants and Mets, but we may never really need to. Correa's a Minnesota Twin again, and now that we're 2 years out of all of this going down, what happened next for everyone involved? Correa took the high road. He, at least publicly, has not expressed any ill will against anyone else. He said that he views the longer-term deals falling apart as a sign. Correa's a father. He might not want to commit 13 years to baseball at some point while his kids grow up. He led the Twins to a playoff appearance in 2023, their first playoff game win in 20 years, and their first playoff series win in 21, as one of their most important players. He's been excellent when healthy for the Twins. He has suffered some foot injuries, but not necessarily ankle, and he's played so well that he, again, might outgrow the Minnesota Twins. They're at a bit of a crossroads now as a team, and Correa is connected to trade rumors as we speak. Whether or not he completes all of the 6 years he signed for as a Twin remains to be seen. But for now, he's been delivering on the field. The Giants seem to be a mixed bag here. Their fans booed Correa in his first game back in San Francisco, like it was his fault that the team was spooked by his ankle. The Giants regretted even setting the press conference before everything was finalized. Blaming Carlos here is just bizarre. They also felt happy for Carlos for eventually finding closure, and felt bad for him that this whole saga played out as publicly as it did. That was the biggest rarity in all this. Sure, deals fall apart behind closed doors all the time. The public watched a marquee free agent lose out on 2 mega deals in the span of a couple weeks. The Giants lost more than they won in both 2023 and 2024, missing the playoffs both years, and never did get a player of Correa's caliber. They cleaned house with the president of baseball operations that nearly signed Correa, and the first offseason after gave out the largest contract in team history to shortstop Willy Adames. The Mets underperformed significantly in 2023. Could you imagine the fan and media chaos if a second $300+ million player was on that team too? However, I'd argue every Mets fan out there would tell you they're okay now with not signing Carlos Correa. I'm sure Steve Cohen feels the same way too. They reinvested that saved money in a different franchise-changing way. See? All's well that ends well. Maybe the only time you could ever say that about an Oppenheimer.